Welcome back to the Barrels Talk Podcast. We are back with another episode of Let's Talk About It. In this episode, we are going to be continuing our series of doing a deep dive into every single NBA team before this upcoming season. We are going to be focusing on the Philadelphia 76ers in today's episode. Before we get into that, make sure to leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, helps out a ton. But let's talk about the 76ers because there's a lot to dive into. I mean, another huge season coming up for this team. Last year ended in another disappointing year. Joel Embiid had the injury towards the back half of last year, which really hurt this team in terms of playoff seeding. When Joel Embiid was healthy, this team was easily a top 3 team out East seeding-wise and talent-wise as well. But I do think it's a blessing in disguise for what happened to them last year. They came into the offseason with a very interesting situation that I have never seen happen for a superstar player in the middle of their prime for a team. They completely were able to have a somewhat reset of the entire roster. The only 2 people that were signed on the roster was Joel Embiid, and they obviously had Tyrese Maxey because he was just looking for the extension as well. So those are the only 2 main people on this team that were obviously staying for the future. Everything else, they had a ton of cap space to go make another move and make other smaller moves to bring guys back and to bring guys in that can really better fit the roster and help bolster up this roster in the way that I think the Philadelphia Sixers really want to do. And I think this is a perfect situation for them because you still have Joel Embiid in the middle of his prime. Tyrese Maxey is MIP just coming off of a career year for him. And now you have done, in my opinion, a really good job. I think they've had an A+ offseason for what the moves that they have been able to do and the people that they have been able to bring in to really bolster up this roster. Going into the offseason moves, you obviously bring in Paul George off the sign in free agency. You bring back Kelly Oubre, which I think was major, who I think is a steal that they got last year that people really, for some reason, didn't want, and acts like Kelly Oubre couldn't hoop. Bring him into Philly. He's a great fit. I love his fit on the court as well. You re-sign Andre Drummond, who's a more than serviceable enough backup big in case Joel Embiid does go down. You sign Eric Gordon to be a veteran. Adem Bona, you get him in later on in the draft, which I think can be a nice young piece for you moving forward. You also bring in Caleb Martin. You sign him, who took a pay cut from what the Miami Heat were offering, so something went awry there, and you steal him from somebody you consider an Eastern Conference rival in Miami, which is huge. And then you draft Jared McCain with your first-round draft pick. So I think that's another good draft pick as well. Perfect fit, somebody that can play on and off the ball, off your bench. So, and then looking at this, you still have Kyle Lowry. You brought in Reggie Jackson. Looking at this roster, and you bring in Yabusele off of his Olympic performance. I don't know how much of a role he is going to play, but he is back in the league after what he showed in the Olympic Games. But looking at the starting 5, I think it's going to be interesting. It could definitely go a number of different ways. I think they could really be a little bit more versatile than they have in years past because Tyrese Maxey has shown that he can be the one and be the primary point guard. But you can go a lot of different ways. I think it could really be based off what team you're playing. Because I think it's going to be on a regular basis Kyle Lowry, Tyrese Maxey, Paul George, Kelly Oubre, Joel Embiid. But I could see a world where like maybe you want a bigger lineup in and you go Tyrese Maxey, Caleb Martin, Paul George, Kelly Oubre, Joel Embiid, be able to switch multiple positions as well. I think there is a world where like Jared McCain does really prove himself and you can go Tyrese Maxey, Jared McCain, Paul George, Kelly Oubre at times, and Embiid just because of Jared McCain's shooting and spacing ability alone. So they have a lot of versatility on this team, which is something I feel like the 76ers have kind of had, but also not had at certain points without this era of Joel Embiid. But looking at this, I do think this is going to be a team that's primed for success. I feel like they are a title contender going into the year, as long as the X factor which is Joel Embiid's health. If he stays healthy, there's no question in my mind that this team is going to be a title contender, especially out of the Eastern Conference. I think they match up with Boston really well now. They have the wing depth to be able to guard Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, but they also have something that Boston does lack to have depending on the health of Kristaps Porzingis, which is an interior presence, kind of like how I was talking about in the Milwaukee Bucks deep dive. Those are the things that can give the Boston Celtics problems. They are a team that is focused on being able to stop perimeter players. When you're looking at their entirety run to the finals last year, Tyler Hero in the Miami Heat, he was the main guard over there. They did a great job on Tyler Hero. Then you go to the Cleveland Cavaliers. I know Donovan Mitchell was hurt for most of that series, but they did a great job on Darius Garland because they have Drew Holiday and Derek White. And then you go to the conference finals where Tyrese Halliburton struggled against them. And then you go to the finals, Kyrie and Luka, they struggled against the Boston Celtics. They are a team that is tailor-made to stop opposing point guards. But when you have a Joel Embiid, a Giannis Antetokounmpo, I think those two teams match up very, very well. And now you're looking at the New York Knicks with Karl-Anthony Towns. I think those teams have the personnel to best match up with the Boston Celtics because of that interior presence that they provide. But looking at this, it all doesn't matter unless Joel Embiid stays healthy. If Joel Embiid stays healthy, I think they're a top 5 team in basketball all year. All year. Easily if he's healthy all year. They're a top 5 team in basketball if he's healthy all year. So I think that's the X factor. If he's healthy, I do think they will be a top 5 team in the league the entire year. But I do think if he were to go down for an injury or if they're resting him more and more to make sure he is healthy for the playoffs, I do think this team is more equipped than last year's team to take a blow like that because you added a Paul George, because you have Andre Drummond that I feel like is a serviceable backup big now. You have Tyrese Maxey. I feel like him and Paul George can be enough to carry the load and keep the ship afloat while Joel Embiid's either resting or he's coming off some knick-knack injury. So I think they are better suited to take a blow like that this year compared to past years as well. But the X factor I have is Joel Embiid's health. If he's healthy, I think they're easily a top 5 team in basketball. The expectations, I expect this team to be a top 3 team out east easily. They have the talent, they have the depth, they have the versatility to be a top team out east. And they're well coached compared to past years, why I think this is an actual coaching upgrade in Nick Nurse. But I think Joel Embiid is going to have a really, really good year. I think Paul George is in the perfect situation for his career right now as being the second, third option, maybe even first option on some nights. Let's not act like Paul George is a scrub now because he's the third option. Paul George is still that guy. He's still like that. I see a lot of nights where he's going to be the number 1 option on some given nights for the 76ers. But I think he's in the perfect spot in his career right now, and Maxey is still ascending, and I think he's going to get even better and better and just more poised out there on the court as well. And they all fit off and play off of each other really, really well, depending on their fit. We haven't seen it on the court yet, but the fit of the guys that they do have on this roster fit together really, really well. And I think they have a very versatile team that can match up with a lot of different teams to get a lot of different teams' problems. But I expect this team to be a top 3 team all year, and if Joel Embiid stays healthy, I think they could be the favorite besides Boston to get out of the Eastern Conference over New York and even over a Milwaukee Bucks team. That's how talented I think the 76ers unit is. Main question I do have for this team to wrap this episode up: can Maxey take another leap? I didn't want to make this, can Joel Embiid stay healthy, because I already made that the X factor. It's interesting to see what else is left of Tyrese Maxey's development when you're talking about what he did last year, 26 points a game, most improved player, all-star. Like, you're looking at all of this from Tyrese Maxey. Now he has the contract to back all that up. What is next? What's the next step? I'm not going to be surprised if his numbers do take a tick back because you're adding a Paul George. And he's not going to need to do too much. So looking at that, I think Tyrese Maxey can have a really complete year. But what is that next? If he can take another leap, this team is a finals bound team. If he takes another leap with what you're going to get from Paul George, if Joel Embiid stays healthy, if you add all of those 3 together with a deep roster that is well coached, the sky is the limit for this team. If he takes another leap, I think the sky is the limit for the Philadelphia 76ers. Very huge year. Like always, it seems like for the 76ers, it seems like this is more of a championship or bust year than it has been in the past, but they have Paul George on a long-term deal, Maxey and Joel Embiid for the next couple of seasons, so it's not saying this is a one-and-done year for this team, but the media is going to put pressure on this team to make it seem like it's a one-and-done type of year. But I do think they're going to have pressure like any other title contending team is, and I do think they are a title contender. But Philadelphia 76ers are going to be pretty good. I think if the Joel Embiid stays healthy, they're going to be a top 5 team in the league the entire year. But that is all I have for the Philadelphia 76ers and this deep dive. Thank you guys for tuning into the Barrel Talk podcast. Hope you tune in to future episodes.